Welcome to episode 55 of the Trash Talk Business Podcast. We are here to talk about growing, scaling, getting in, getting out, just generally the business of junk, the business of stuff, the business of the waste world that we all live in. If you've come here, it means you want to do something different than you did yesterday. And I'm going to tell you something. You came to the right place. As always, I'm Andy Weins from the great state of Wisconsin. Joining us from Texas, Casey Bubba Lawrence. Casey, what are we talking about today?
Andy, we got a pretty cool guest today. I actually met him with you in Vegas. We had some pretty damn good food when we met him, too. His name's Travis Johnson. He's Mr. Podcast. So without further ado, Travis, how the hell are you?
Man, I'm doing fantastic this morning. I appreciate that wild introduction, Casey. Andy, nice to see you again. I'm just ready and raring to go.
Let's tell the origin story. We'll tell the origin story, and then we'll talk business and military and all the things. So here's the origin story. There's an event called the MIC, the Military Influencers Conference. Highly recommend it. Casey turned me on to it. He went to the first one. Him and I went to the second one together. Then the COVID, and then third one was in Vegas last year. I flew in, and as I was leaving O'Hare, I called my buddy Andy Nelson, another vet, lawyer. If you need a trademark patent attorney, Andy Nelson, shout out to my guy, lives down there in the OC. Awesome guy. Anyhow, I called him and I said, hey, what are you doing, man? Are you going to the MIC? He goes, yeah, I'm leaving Los Angeles right now. I'm driving. It's about 3.5, 4 hours. I said, no shit. I'm flying. It's about 3.5, 4 hours. And I said, I'll call you when I land. I landed. He was 8 minutes from the airport. So as he drove into Vegas from LA, he picked me up from the airport, right? So no Uber needed. Casey was in the day before. He was already on the strip with a cocktail in one hand and a burger in the other, I believe. So we picked him up on Las Vegas Boulevard at an intersection. You know, have you ever been to LA? Like, you're not LA, Las Vegas. You're not supposed to stop in a lot of places, and they got the barriers and all this other stuff. Not to us. We stopped at a light. Casey jumped in. That was it. And then we went over to Resorts World, and we picked up a random guy with yellow sunglasses on the side of the road.
Yes.
And the four of us who had not really, we didn't show up together, right? We came in from different ways and places. We ended up at a Venezuelan restaurant within a half hour of me landing. I'm like, this is awesome. And I was the first one in the car, so I got the front seat. I'm a tall, good looking guy, so that's where I wanted to be. And we met Travis. We spent like 2 hours with him that day. And then over the next 4 days of the conference, I think I saw you twice. That was so that was like 6-7 months ago. And now it's like, hey man, remember when we had that really cool lunch together? Let's talk business. And so here we are. Travis joined me on my other podcast called Welcome Home, the transformation from troops and boots to veterans in the civilian world. It's a new endeavor I've taken on to talk about that period of time. And that period of time starts the day you join and ends the day you die. So it's a large period of time as you transform yourself. And so Travis is a Navy vet, worked on ejection seats, right? That was right. Ejection seats. And then he was the goose to the Maverick, sitting up there in planes, watching other guys fly, And so now he's here on the Trash Talk Business Podcast. So there we go. That is the origin story. So what did I miss? Is there anything in there I missed, Travis, that's of note for our listeners?
That's a pretty apt description of how it is we met and got together. And it's no joke about that conference because I could hardly get out of the lobby to either go into any of the events or to leave to go get food. I had some woman like chase me down when I was about to get on the escalator to head down and grab a slice in the middle of the day. She's like, I know you're going to eat. I just wanted to say hi real quick. And I didn't want you to run away without the chance to take my card. And before she was done talking, there was 2 more people that showed up to say hello to me. So I kind of felt like I hit this like mini celeb status. Like it's like, am I low key famous? Like I have no idea. It's so bizarre.
I didn't know who you were at the beginning or at the end. So to me, you were a guy in yellow sunglasses that likes Venezuelan food. So
me, I'm just used to women chasing me everywhere I go. So it's kind of like.
Well, your wife was there. She was chasing you the whole time.
She was.
It's true.
Hell, she was in front of me. Everybody was chasing her.
God bless. They went out and had steak dinner. Didn't even invite me. I should have. Yeah, Travis, you and I should have gone out and had a steak dinner together. Although the next time I went to Vegas without Casey, Carnivore? No, Carved. What was the name of that joint? Now I gotta look it up. My
Oh,
new
man, I
favorite
gotta look at it.
steakhouse in Vegas. And I went there with a listener. I went there with a guy. So that was the day I had lunch or I shouldn't say I had lunch and then a cocktail, both with listeners of the Trash Talk Business Podcast. So there you go, right? When we talk about local, if I'm in your town, I will stop by. Speaking of, this episode might come out in time. I don't know. Math ain't great for me. Actually, I love math. Taylor's more in charge of the math of things. I'm going to be in Nashville. Total side note. I'm going to be in Nashville shooting videos with Jobber. What do we call it? May 8th through the 11th. I'm almost positive this episode is going to come out that week or the week before. Taylor will probably come in here in a second and tell me whether I'm right or wrong. Anyways, people already know them and listen to podcasts. Casey and I will both be the Waste Expo in New Orleans the week before that, May 1st through the 4th. And I'll be in Nashville pimping Jobber because I love Jobber. And they're flying me down there to do some podcast episodes to talk about what it's like to run a junk roll company. And the beautiful thing is I'm going to take all the knowledge from this podcast and then boil it down into 3 30-minute segments.
Because we learn most from our listeners, believe it or not.
It's true. There you go. Taylor said that sounds about right, give or take a date or two. So that ain't, I mean, that's about as hillbilly math as it is. Well, hold on. Episode 52 came out this week. Now we're going to do this. All right. So we are recording this on the 17th of April. So episode 52 came out this week. So the 24th will be episode 53. The 1st will be episode 54. And the 8th will be episode 55. There you go. If you are listening to this episode on the day it comes out, on the 8th of May, I'm in Nashville. Call me. I have nothing to do that Monday night. I'm getting in earlier in the day. I'm in town for 2 days. I'm going to hang out with Rachel and Rick. They're demo consulting clients of mine. Down there, they own a demo company. Awesome, Rachel. A lot of shout outs this morning. We're only 7 minutes into the broadcast, and we've already shouted out Waste Expo, which already happened by this time. Jobber, which always happens because Jobber runs your business. And Rachel and Rick for if you need demo in the Nashville area. They live in Munsterford, something. I don't know. They live in Nashville Light. Big old dump trailer, husband-wife team. Hired their first employee. So that's for anybody in the junk removal space, that's a huge deal when you hire your first employee, not like random guy on the side of the road that helps you once or twice a month. All right. Now that I've gone completely off the rails, let's talk, Travis. So the reason I wanted to bring you on this podcast in particular is most of our listeners operate owner-operators of junk removal businesses or small businesses. We got a couple guys that do landscaping and things like that always come on this podcast and or listen to this podcast, and it will hit us up from time to time. But mostly people that work in home services, a lot of mom and pop operations, which is where I started, which where Casey started, kind of family ops. So I want to talk about it. So you already hit on something that's interesting. Is you said, hey, I went to this conference and I felt like a celebrity. One of the challenges that I had early on in this business, and Casey did too, and it was maybe the Mick that really, I think it was the Mick. I look back at it. The Mick was probably the first conference where I was like,
DC,
I can't
man.
afford to take 3 days off. Yeah, but I'm saying the first conference I went to as an adult.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking this through. Like now I'm talking about Waste Expo, and I went to Junk Con, and I went to. I'm speaking at the. I spoke.
The first one I went to. The first one I went to was in Orlando, and the only reason I went is because my stepdad was like, "If you get one thing from it, it was worth it." And I remember him saying that because at the time I was it wasn't like small-minded. I was just ignorant, right? I was naive. I didn't know if it was going to help my business, but it wasn't meant to. It was help my professional side.
Yeah, and you invited me, and I was like, "It's stupid, Casey. I don't want to go to Orlando. I gotta, Casey, I gotta work. I gotta work that day. I got shit to do that day." And then in DC, I went because it was like, oh, I haven't been to DC. I looked at it as a vacation, not as work. And then turns out we did both. And so I want to talk about that, Travis. You have been very successful in your podcasting world through the power of connection, right? You had your podcast to give away answers, and now you have other podcasts where you talk to the titans of business. So let's talk about this. This episode will really focus on what are you doing as the solopreneur business owner to really be the titan within your business, the icon within your industry. Those are that's the status that most of us want to get to, myself included. So Travis, you've been very successful. What are things that have led to your success to be known as the podcast guy where women chase you down escalators?
Well, that's quite the lead in for the question. I did want to comment on your comment of being too busy
Please.
for Orlando. This is one of the things
Yep.
that has hit me in the last couple of years. And the question is, are you too busy to be successful? Because you were too busy to go to that conference. You were too busy. Are you too busy? Anyone listening to this, are you too busy to show up to the things that can actually impact your growth, build your network, provide value? If you're too busy, you're never going to grow. You're never going to reach whatever level of success you want to have if you're too busy.
That's a sniper shot if I ever heard one.
Yeah. Oh, no. I read about it in my book, Words Fucking Matter, coming out June 14th, right? There's a section in my book. Right now it's the glossary, not glossary, shit words you got to get rid of. That might be the whatever. And the word busy is exactly that. Like, you can be busy, and if I go on your phone, I'll see you've been on Facebook for an hour a day. Right? That was one of the things when Casey and I were part of the franchise organization. I was like, man, you got to go to networking events. I used to do 45, 50 networking events a month. Like, if there was a ribbon cutting or a thing, hell, I snuck into a networking event the other day. I was at one event in the morning. Someone's like, oh, are you going to go to the Country Financial golf event at X Golf at 1 o'clock? I go, no, I didn't even hear about it. So I went and got my hair cut, went over to X Golf, walked in there like, hey, who do you know? Well, this is what I'll take a step back. I go, Country Financial. I heard of those cats. I went onto my LinkedIn. I typed in Country Financial. I found 5 people I knew from Country Financial, 2 of them that I met in real life. And so I walked in, they're like, oh, who are you a guest of? And I just name dropped 2 people. They're like, oh, okay, we're going to put you down. I walk in, and I thought this was like a 1 hour, hey, we're doing it, hit a couple balls. No. This was a 18-hole scrambled tournament at Virtual Golf. And so now I'm like, fuck, I'm going to get caught. But I played it cool, and the one guy's like, "Oh yeah, my buddy's showing up late, so you can hit a few balls for him." I hit 1 ball, and then his buddy shows up, so not late. And then the lady who was running was like, "Oh, hey, these guys had a cancellation, so you can come over here." So I ended up playing 18 holes of virtual golf with a banker, a property a real estate investor guy, and then a Country Financial insurance guy who does the commercial insurance for this other guy. So it's like, I snuck into an event and ended up working. The point is, back when we were part of the franchise system, Casey and I would argue with people on Facebook in our closed group about going to networking events. And people are like, I ain't got time for that. Right? And I'm like, you do. You're choosing to not make it a priority.
Making time.
Same with me. Right? And I am, right? So here's one side of the fence. Here I am pointing the finger at other people, right? And that old adage, right? You got a knife hand. Because when you point, right, you got the 3 fingers pointing back at you, that fucking grade school bullshit, right? I was knife-handing people like, hey, motherfuckers, you need to go to networking events. And then here I am saying I don't have time to work on myself and improve myself, right? It's one thing to improve your fighting position. It's a whole other thing to improve yourself as a person, which, when I did the interview for your podcast, Travis, before we even on the podcast, right, you actually interview people and vet them out, not us. We're like, hey, do you have a microphone? Come on. As long as Casey can pronounce your last name, we're good to hook. And one of the things, the first question Travis asked me, now we've met, he knows me. The first thing he asked me is, hey, what do you do to improve yourself every day? I'm like, this motherfucker. Like, you know me. You know I'm awesome. And it made me think. And I was like, oh, man, this guy's legit, right? And I have to really think, what do I do? I can tell you, I had a lot to add. If you'd asked me that question 3 years ago, I'd be like, I don't know.
Dude.
I work on my business a lot.
Yeah.
I bitch a lot. Like, it's
well, I think, and it's like the military, right? On dead time, you try to go to schools or you try to do any courses you can because, hey, you're not at war and you're not training. So try to do something self-development. And the thing about Travis, like I remember you and I, we had just met, we're eating Venezuelan food. And you literally are just talking to us about, hey, look, this is what I do differently. And I remember we pulled up your website. I mean, we pulled up everything right there at a fucking table, eating food, just met. And it wasn't like, hey, let's set up a call and I'll fucking charge you for all this information. No, you're like, look, legitimately, this is what I do now. And this is my why. And we were looking at Andy and I both. And we're just like, okay, holy shit. We need to start looking into this more. That's all it takes. People don't understand that. Andy said it best. Within the first 30 minutes of him being in town, There's 4 fucktards in a fucking car driving down the strip of Vegas, but there was so much value out of that one car ride and lunch, even though we didn't see you that much during the conference. It didn't matter. I mean, hell, at that point, technically, we could have all went home and be like, yeah, you know what? We got some new information. A lot of us don't understand that in the beginning. We don't understand, all we see is the dollar signs. Oh, man, it cost me $500 to get there. It cost me $300 to stay there, blah, 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 blah. I could be here making the same money, killing myself. But the problem is you're looking at now and tomorrow. You need to be looking at 6 months, a year from now. And what you're doing now affects the 6 months and a year from now. Who you meet today, who you meet tomorrow can affect the 6 months to a year from now.
I fully agree. When I look at what I do with podcasting, when I started the show, I didn't have anything in mind other than to provide value. My first show that I started, I was deployed to the Kingdom of Bahrain. It was in the Middle East, right? Trying to schedule people in the Americas, either early morning or late at night, so we could have a decent time to talk. And all I knew is I wanted to provide value. And at this time, it was the nonprofit space. And I didn't know particularly what I was doing in the podcast world or whatever, but no one was really teaching that audience. So everyone I brought into the show, I had a private little masterclass with them that they recorded. They were teaching me, but, it was for the audience. My learning curve was exponential. It's not like you learn a little bit with one guest and then you learn a little bit with the next guest. You learn a bit when you start learning like that as a podcast host. And I know you both can attest to this. You said it earlier that your guests teach you most of the things that you know. And even though I had been in the nonprofit industry for a couple of years, even while I was on active duty, and I had some success, there was so much that I didn't know. And every single person that I met, every single person that I interviewed, you start growing that network, you start growing the value that you're able to provide. And I fully understand why people don't like networking events. The vast majority of people that go to these things, they're not going to network or build value. They're going there to prospect for their business. And if you're showing up, prospecting, trying to get leads, then you've missed the point completely. You are, in fact, wasting your time, and no one wants to talk to you if all you do is try to qualify for them for your business.
You have to learn how to network properly. I know it sounds crazy, but Andy and I both have talked about this before many times. You can't just walk in and be a part of the group. That's the other problem. That actually scared me away from networking as much as I was, because I started noticing it was just an after hours kind of hangout. It became so much more of a, hey, look, here, it's that time again, and we're all here, and we're all getting drunk. And it's like, no offense, but like, this isn't helping me at all. Like, there's no value coming from this group. When it's like, well, I know I can provide value, but if it's not being accepted because the environment's changed, well, then why am I even here? So then I have to go look at more valuable networking opportunities. And that's why I like, personally, breakfast and lunch, because for me, that's when everybody's sharpest. That's when everybody's hungry. Their brain is wanting to soak up more, knowledge and connecting, whatever you can say. But no, absolutely. You have to learn how to network. And that's the biggest thing. I hate it when you walk in and someone's immediately like, hey, I'm a realtor. Do you know anybody selling or buying? Shut the fuck up. We know. If you're a realtor, you got 2 customers. Got it. I'm going to write down forever. It's the same 2 customers, buy or sell. Cool. But I'm not doing it. I'm not buying a house. I'm not selling. And if I was, I'm not coming to this event to do so. So how can you provide value for me? Who can you get me in front of?
Well, what you're talking about is transactional relationships. And that's what it comes down to. Same with you, Travis, right? If it was like, hey, Travis, what can you teach us over lunch? Cool. We're going to take that and run with it. That'd have been very transactional. Now, you were very open and honest with the conversation we had. Hell, it took me 6 months to digest all of it and implement it into our podcast. And I'm like, man, I got to follow up with this guy. Well, because it was beyond that, right? It wasn't, and you weren't sitting there trying to sell us a master class or whatever, right? Sell us your podcasting books or all that stuff, right? Like, you told us about it, but you transcended, you gave value. And that's the challenge that we have is networkers, right? When I go to networking events, I am looking to buy more than I'm looking to sell. I'm looking to make introductions, not chase leads. And this is something I learned from this gentleman, Michael Creed, in our area. He said, your job isn't to chase don't chase leads, work for introductions. And the way you work for introductions is you provide value first. You listen to somebody. Hey, what's your story? What's your situation? And you listen. Oh, hey, if I'm hearing you correctly, this is the hurdle. This is the obstacle. Let me introduce you to this person who can overcome that hurdle, that obstacle. Now, if they have a transaction, awesome. Most times, people remember me and like me is because I set up somebody else to fix a problem. And on the flip side, like realtors love referring us because their job is to get to the close. And they're like, hey, get to like hell. I came from an estimate. I stopped an estimate earlier today, and it's a real estate situation, eviction, yada yada. She's like, hey, I just need someone to get this thing done. She didn't care about the price. She just wanted it done. Like you're solving a problem. That's the other thing. When you go to networking events and you can explain the problem you solve, not the services you offer, then people will say yes or no. Do I need you? But moreover, they will remember what problem you solve. And in the future, when that problem arises, they're like, oh, I got a guy. Like right now, Travis, like actually, I don't think I've talked to you about this yet. And I'm going to now. With Jobber, when I was talking to them, like, hey, you have a podcast. What have you seen? What have you done? And I already said, hey, let me introduce you to my guy, Travis, because he knows all these questions you're asking me. Like, I'm going to give you the watered down hillbilly version of what he said. Go talk to my guy, Travis. Actually, I'm going to make the introduction right now. Because have I told you about this, Travis? This is where my head went. Now, see, this is how, right? Because like I'm thinking in my head, this is the conversation I had in my head. Her name's Tina, great lady. I'm literally going to make this email right now because I don't do to-do lists well. When I do a to-do list, I fail. I am better at fire forget. I'm going to do this right now because in my head I'm like I had this full on conversation in my head.
I'm with you, brother. If I don't do it immediately or put it on my calendar, it's like it doesn't exist. It never happened.
Yeah. I can do the calendar. I do a calendar thing. That's why my entire life is scheduled. I talk about this on the podcast. I talk about this in my book. Scheduled things are like, oh, I'm going to do this thing, and this is the date and time I have selected. Something like an email, I don't. It's not something I'm going to calendar up, right, and schedule. So now I'm going to write this email right now. So when you're networking, put in the time, be intentional, ask open-ended questions, be willing to listen and learn, right? Don't be that guy who's slapping the business card, right? Speaking of Vegas, the people that slap business cards when you're walking down the strip. Don't be the person slapping a business card looking to hand it out to anybody and everybody. You got to go out there and connect with people and ask them what you can do for them, who you can introduce them to, what problem you can solve. When you do that, you build connection. It's the give first mind, right? You get what you give, and you got to give first.
Fully agree. There's a friend of mine, Stephen Kuhn, over in Budapest. When I met this guy, I did kind of what you did, Andy.
Oh, yeah, we know Stephen.
Yeah,
we know that cat.
I saw him. He was speaking at the DC event that I missed it because I was online and I was in the Middle East. And I tried to schedule a call with this guy, and he's like, dude, I can't find a time that works for me. And I'm like, where the heck are you? He's like, I'm in Budapest. So it was only 1 hour time difference from where I was. And I'm like, dude, I got a 5-day weekend coming up over Veterans Day. I don't know how it happened, but he's like, I'm like, where are you going to be? He's like, oh, I'm not going to be home. I was like, I didn't ask if you were going to be home. I asked, where are you going to be? And he's like, oh, I'm speaking at a conference in Vienna. I was like, I'll fly to Vienna, go to a conference. And I got on the plane and I flew to Vienna and I took the train into town and I walked into the conference and I didn't have tickets to. I walked up to the place where they had the name tags. I'm like, oh, what's your name, sir? I was like, oh, it's me right here. I'm Pietro. And I put the thing around my neck. Right? The conference has already started. And if he would have, Pietro, whoever this guy was, if he would have shown him, be like, that's my name tag. I'm like, oh, my bad. And I would have gave it back to him. But at that time, I'm already in.
Yeah, you're
right?
good.
I'm already in, and I'm having conversations. This is not my industry. This is a hotel conference. It has nothing to do with podcasting. At the time, I was doing nonprofit stuff. Nothing to do with nonprofits. And I went in and started talking to people, seeing how I could provide value. And when you can provide value, whatever it is, even if it's a connection, right? If you're listening to this right now, and you're like, dude, I don't know anybody, and I don't know how to provide value, do this thing that Steven taught me. You get a map, you print it out, you draw a circle around where you are, either your home or your business, and you go and knock on every door that's a business. Introduce yourself. Hey, I'm Travis. I'm new in town. I help businesses get to their next level of business through the power of podcasting. What is it that you do? Who are you? What do you need? How can I help you? And you might not have an answer for them the first 1, 5, 10, or 15 people. But sooner or later, you're going to meet someone that solves a problem that someone else needed solved. But since they're sitting in their shop running their business, they ain't got time to go meet that person. Now, you showed up, you said what you do, you're just providing value. You don't have an ask for them other than how can you help? And if you don't know how to help, you meet enough people and you will soon find that you are the go-to person. Like, hey, who was that person that you mentioned? Do you know anyone that does this? And all of a sudden, you're in it. People know who you are, where your value lies because it's with them and not with yourself. And anything that you do or provide, I'm still getting referrals that come in each and every week for people that I talked to 4 years ago, not because they bought from me, because they understand who I am as a person.
I think a lot of, well, I was going to say, I think a lot of shortcoming. This generation is very stubborn when it comes to, attempting to grow through networking. They want the shortcut. They want the quick, fast, in a hurry answer. I'm not saying everybody, but a lot I've seen, they want to get to the answer, not work out the question, right? And not work to get the answer. And what I can see is the biggest issue is that there's no sustainability there, right? And you see this with small businesses that started post-COVID because they are getting the aftermath of 2020, and we're just now settling back into what time was ish before COVID.
Yep.
The problem with that, and you see it a lot in real estate, because everybody knows 2020, 2021, real estate just insanely skyrocketed. Realtors were a dime a dozen, and they were just used to do legal stuff. That's it. Houses sold themselves. Everything was great. Yep. Now what you're seeing is realtors that got their license in 2020 or 2019, they're starting to have to actually work for their food. And a lot of them are coming up short because they don't know how to, right? They got in when the getting was good. And now they're like, well, shit. Like, what do you mean this house has been listed for 57 days or 80 days? I thought it was going to be 60 hours. And networking is one of those things where if you don't know your area and the people that are in the area, you're always going to be fighting yourself. And I tell this, so I have, coaching clients, and I tell them all the same thing. Don't ever sell your shit when you go meet other business owners. Don't sell your stuff. Just say hi. Go introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and if you could do anything for them. That's all you need to do. You start building your team of business owners around you, because then they'll start helping you with your fight as well. So like you said, that's a perfect answer. I mean, go up to anybody. You own a deli? Cool. Hey, man, I'm here to get a sandwich, but just want to let you know, my name is Casey. This is what I do, and I'm new in the area. If there's anything I can do, let me know. It's good meeting you. That's all you got to
do. Here's the beautiful thing about it. Casey came up here about 2 years ago, maybe. He came to Wisconsin. I don't know why. And right next to me is a construction company, gravel yard and whatnot. And Casey's like, he's like, hey, what do they do over there? He goes, I got some big heavy equipment. And Casey, he's a little kid with Tonka trucks. He's like, that's pretty dope. I was like, I don't know what they do. Literally, they're 2 doors away from me. And I'm like, I don't know. I literally don't even know what they do. He's like, okay. He's like, well, let's go figure it out. So we walk in, and this is an industrial park I live in, work in. I basically live here. And the sign on their door says no soliciting. Sounds good. So what we walk in and do, we go to the receptionist, and you can tell she's not having it, right? She's like, these motherfuckers, right? So the first thing I asked her, I said, what do you guys do here? She goes, well, what do you mean? I said, what do you do here? Like, what kind of, I see you got dirt and gravel. Like, what kind of material do you haul? Oh, we do this. I said, okay. I said, I own a junk removal company. Right now, it's like, okay, here comes the pitch. Instead, I go, and sometimes we have customers that need work done. Like I had last week, someone said, hey, I got 10 yards of dirt I need moved out of my property because we had a patio, right? And so I said, we get projects like that. I said, is that something you would take on? And then she's like, oh, no, we only do this, this, and this. And she goes, well, tell me more about this junk removal company. Right. So I came in not soliciting. I asked, hey, how can I buy from you? What is it you do? Nice trucks. Hey, we're neighbors. Right. And I like what you said too, Travis. You can say you're new to the area to anybody that doesn't know you. So you could be in your spot for 10 years. If you walk in and you don't know them and they don't know you, hey, I'm new to the area. Right. As in, like, right. That's always like, I've had some of my guys are apprehensive. They're like, oh, I feel kind of stupid cold knocking. Tell them you're new.
Yeah.
Right. Tell them you're new, and if you know them, don't tell them you're new. There's your fucking decision-making matrix. Like, hey, guys, I've seen you before. Oh, you know what we do? Oh, yeah, you guys are camo crew. You do this, this, and this. Awesome. Can I give you some brochures so you can tell more people?
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've had plenty of doors slammed in my face.
Yeah.
And like hair salon, nail salons, they're like, yeah, no, we don't, no. And I'm like, all right, well, anybody, and I'll get cheeky about it. I'll be like, anybody here garage in their junk? Or garage in their junk? Junk in their garage? You got some garage in your junk? Anyways, and most times people will be like, oh my God, my husband this, my husband that. I'm like, you should call Gamble Crew. Right? Like, have a little bit of fun with it. And here's the deal. If you say, hey, I'm sitting there, to Casey's point, we met a couple groups of kids, I should say. I'll call them kids because they're under 25 at the Junk Con in Raleigh. And I'm like, what do you guys do for networking? And basically it's like Google, Facebook, Yelp, Nextdoor, and then sit behind the computer and wait. And it's because they grew up with a generation where all the answers were in the palm of their hand. And it's like, well, let me tell you something. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of answers that are not in the palm of your hand. They're not. Like, who's next door to you and what do they do? I know plenty of people in this industrial park don't have a website because they're old school. They don't need a website. And if they do have a website, it doesn't have anybody's contact info of who will buy or sell to you, right? So you got to get out and pound the pavement and you got to figure out the answers. That's the challenge we have with our society. It's like we teach people, and I have a college degree, so I can speak to this. It's like college, to a certain extent, teaches you researchability. Up until that point, you don't really learn to research. You learn to get the answer.
Yeah.
And there's a difference there. Learning how to learn versus learning how to memorize. And that was one thing in the military. The military was one of the few places where, like, they ask you a question, you're like, I think I know the answer. It's like, man, we don't pay you to think. We pay you to control F. We pay you to read the damn paragraph. We pay you, hell, when I first started going to military schools, we had the binders. We had no shit paper. And you had to pay attention in class and know which FM, TM, AR, right? It's a field manual, training manual, or Army regulation, or ALRAC, which I still have no idea what the fucking ALRAC is. It's ALARCT, ALRAC. I'm gonna Google it right now. This answer I can find. Like, you had to know where to look.
Yeah.
And then you had to read. And you had to read more than one paragraph. Now you Google shit and it's like whatever Wikipedia tells you is gospel and you move on with your life. And it's like those answers aren't available for entrepreneurs. Half the people, like, I do a lot of recycling. Everyone knows here. Half the people I sell to, whether it's the wash machine man, the mattress guy, hell, my Aunt Joni, like, these people aren't on Google. You can't type in antique store that will buy this particular thing from me in this area. It's like, no, you got to network. You got to figure out who these people are.
Well, the secret,
and you got to go out there.
And people always ask for secrets, right? Hey, what's the secret to success? I tell them it's all around you, man. Every single business that surrounds you within a mile radius, they have the secrets. You know why? Because coming together and saying, hey, look, we all own businesses here. What are problems that we can all help fix together, right? And for us down here in Texas, we used to be known as the cheap labor market. Like, everything was, you can get labor for anything. Well, it started going up, right? And next thing you know it, even day laborers, minimum 15, 16 an hour, which is a lot for day laborers down here. Now they're higher. So what you started seeing is a lot of businesses were having issues with keeping people on. And they're like, hey, how do we fix this? Well, I was in a very labor intensive business. Hey, I have to convince someone to come out here, get paid at least the most in my industry down here, but you're going to work your ass off all day, mostly outside. And it's difficult when you're competing with, Target, Walmart. Hey, come work here for the same amount or more inside, warehouse, AC, whatever. So getting together with these small businesses that have the same issues with you or as you do, that's the secret sauce, because then they're going to go to bat for you. Or they're going to say, hey, man, I got a guy looking for this kind of work, or I got a guy who wants an extra shift here or whatever. And then you start playing ball together. And I think a lot of us don't know how to do that in the beginning. Does that make sense?
Nope.
We kind of stick to our own thing, and we stay in our own head and like, oh, I don't know that person. And, oh, they're a barbecue joint. How are they going to use my business? Well, that's not the point. You don't want them to be your customer. You want them to be your ally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Without a doubt, podcasting is an online thing. There's some in-person podcast stuff, but like, you've got to be in places where you've got a studio and you got to set up. Podcasting as a host or as a guest is a phenomenal way to build relationships online. First of all, you're not selling anything. Like, hey man, I'd love to share your story. Andy, come on the show, let people know what makes you a Titan and all the things that you had to go through. And he's like, what do you mean I got to answer these questions? You know who I am. When he got past that, and a lot of people have to get past that, they found out that it's so much more than what they thought it would be. For everyone out there running your own business, this is a little pitch for my stuff. Buy my stuff or don't buy my stuff. But if you're in business, you need to have some kind of marketing budget. If you don't have one, like most people don't, you can go be a guest on unlimited podcasts and showcase how you're willing to help, what your expertise is, and how to solve their problem. Bring people into your ecosystem that can help you do the whatever. Because it might cost you 10 grand to market to 10 people in your local area. But if you go on a podcast as a guest and you market to their whole audience of 50,000 people, and you can do that 5 times a week, that's 250,000 people you've marketed to for $0. You go in, you provide the host value, you speak to their audience, right? Provide their audience value and be a solid person. And you're going to start getting these connections that you never had imaginable before, because maybe you don't have time to go to Rotary. Maybe you don't have time to go to the Chamber of Commerce. Maybe you don't have the funds to go to that event, network, or meeting. My wife's got ferrets behind me waving at me. My son's got a pair of ferrets, so she likes to play with them before she goes to work. Bring them in here on the show.
So there's a
first ferret. Bye, sweetie.
Yeah.
If you want to provide value, but you don't have the time, find a podcast where you can schedule the time to go spend 30 minutes, an hour, or 90 minutes and market to their audience, provide value to them, provide for value to their audience. Right now, as a guest, I'm sharing Andy and Casey's audience, and they're sharing my audience, all the people I already know, like, and trust who I am. Do you think I'm going to promote the show? Absolutely. Hey, check out the interview I did with Andy and Casey on the Trash Talk Business podcast. We dropped this knowledge bomb, and this knowledge bomb. You got to check them out. Do you think people are going to click? You think people are going to watch? You think people are going to sign in? Absolutely they are, but only if you're out there providing value.
Well, and that's where I love podcasting. I look at all the marketing initiatives I do, and podcasting is the one that really takes the least amount of effort. I mean, for our listeners, it's like, you guys know, we goof about, like, it's like, hey, let's get somebody on and go. And we have people on. We take a few flyers. There's been a few guests where it's like, we're not sure how this is going to go. And sometimes those are our best podcasts. And even we promote, and I'll do a promotion right here. It's like, hey, if it's not difficult to apply for our podcast, and almost everybody that has applied to get on our podcast, we've had on. So long as you can articulate some level of value. I can't think of any. There's maybe one person we haven't let on because it was going to be a complete pitch fest, right? And beyond that, it's like, and even there was a couple people that we thought were going to pitch, and we let them on because it was like, oh, let's figure this out. What the hell do we know? Worst case, they reveal their hand, and they're no good to to us and to our audience. And so, and also the nice thing about podcasting is now, right, in this world, you've done something virtual. If you're a business owner, you've been on a Zoom call, and if you can be on a Zoom call, you can be on a podcast. You also have time to really figure out and develop your voice. Why is it you do what you do? We're 55 episodes into this podcast, and I'd say we're scratching the surface of where it's going to go. I think it might have been you, Travis, that said, hey, you got to get 100 episodes in before you know what the hell you're doing. Almost positive you said that. And it was like, cool. Wait, we're halfway there, and that's good. And that's the challenge. We live now in a world where a lot of people, even in the junk removal space, like Casey said, 21 and 22 were very good years. You just had to show up with a truck and a trailer and a good attitude, and you were in business. It's like, well, no, now you got to put work in. And I came from putting the work in. I started in 2009, which was not the time to be putting the work in. The real estate market was trash. So the last 2 years have been kind of a feast for some of us. And now it's becoming famine, and I'm still eating because I knew how to feast when when people were down. No, there are people that made money the day that the stock market crashed back in 29. Right? Anybody can do well in the bull market. It's when the market is down. I see it almost every week. We see it on the Facebook groups, whether it's a franchise or independent operator, someone's shutting down. Like, oh, I've been at it for 18 months. I've been at it for 3 years. And right, it's because it was transactional. They didn't work on themselves. They didn't improve their fighting position. They didn't make the networking connections. They didn't put in that hour or two a week necessary so they could be in business a year or two from now.
So actually,
and I was guilty of it myself for years. I didn't put the work in. I didn't even know where to start.
I actually have a buddy of mine. He's a Marine. He's a business broker, right? All he does is buys and sells businesses. And every week he'll post his listings, right? And it's crazy. They get bigger and bigger in this year.
Yep.
And what's crazier than that is they don't just get bigger, they get more diverse. So now you're seeing, like I just saw one, it's a podcast studio for sale. The whole business, the real estate, everything, right? $250,000. I didn't read through all the numbers, but I noticed that normally I'm seeing restaurants, I'm seeing mom and pop shops, but now I'm seeing landscape companies. I'm like, that's crazy. Cause down here, landscape, like you can almost fall into a successful landscape company. The competition is insane, but it works. But then you start seeing these businesses for sale, and obviously you don't know the reasoning behind them, but you see the difference in what last week and the month before. And you're like, man, okay, well, why are all these businesses selling, or at least trying to sell? And that's when you start thinking, okay, well, these businesses have something in common. And that is like, okay, a podcast studio, maybe they're selling because they're real estate, like they can't afford it anymore, or their rent went up, or whatever. Now they're, upside down. Maybe they're not a business yet. Maybe they're just starting out, but they have overhead, and now they can't afford that overhead. So you start seeing, okay, well, shit, if this could happen to something as simple as a podcast studio or a landscape company, what am I doing differently to ensure, the future of my business? Because yeah, let's say you do everything online and it works. We know it works. We've seen it. But what else can you do? What if tomorrow online didn't work? What if tomorrow the internet across the board started charging you for everything? Hey, in order to post anything, it's $1 or whatever. You have to start thinking outside the box. How can I sustain my business for generations to come? And I feel like having a good, diverse marketing portfolio is great. And Travis said it best. Podcast. I'll tell you this right now. I never was a podcast hopper. I didn't see the value in it until you see people like Andy, see people like these other guys that are actually out there. They're going to these podcasts for a reason, not just to be on a podcast, but they actually provide value. And in turn, they're getting not just business, but connections in return. If you don't provide value, you're just kind of a sit-in. You're just there to eat up time. But providing value on someone else's podcast is vital, because now they're going to be like, hey, man, I really appreciate you coming on. A lot of people reached out to me and they want to ask you some questions. And now you have an edge on everybody else.
I love talking about building a business and building assets. There's only 4 types of assets, and there's only 3 ways to make money. The 4 types of assets are real estate. And when I say real estate, I don't mean your personal house. Business, paper, which is stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Commodities, which are gas, oil, coal, diamonds, jewels, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. There's only 3 ways to make money. That's the money you make yourself with active hours, the money that other people make you with their active hours, or money that your money makes you. If you are the CEO, founder, in charge of whatever business it is that you're doing, you have 2 jobs, and 2 jobs only. One is to build the asset, and the other one is to navigate towards the vision. Those are your only 2 jobs. If you talked about restaurants closing up. Why did restaurants close up? Well, first off, their margins are paper thin. Restaurants, by and large, have never really been a great business. But when there was some kind of shift, like COVID happened, like I was in the Middle East when COVID kicked off, there was already a delivery system in place with third country nationals, largely Indians, Pakistanis, Filipinos, and a couple of other small countries, where they were already delivering things via scooter with a big box on the back. They would go shopping for you, deliver your house, deliver you whatever else you bought, and deliver you food hot and fresh to your house. That system was in place in Bahrain when COVID kicked off, and it wasn't in place and working well in America when it happened, right? So you've got people like Uber Eats, DoorDash, and a few other companies that work deals to really. The only way it would work is if they kind of gouge the restaurants, which were already at paper thin margins. The biggest problem with restaurants is they don't build another asset. One of the assets that's common in today's world is building an email list. Your email list is an asset. You get a multiplier 2, 3, 4, 5 just with a list, a generic list of emails and or telephone numbers. Now, if you have a list that is tagged out and specified, like this is a buyer, this is a partner, this is a sponsor. If you have that list tagged out, you're getting 10 to 1 return, $10 for every name on that list. So if you build a list, small town restaurant, you build a list of 5,000 people, any new business that comes into town, they're going to want to buy that list from you. That list is worth $50,000 for them to know who's who in the zoo of whatever town you happen to be in, big or small. And when you have an asset that doesn't depend on how many people are hungry that day, how many people show up, how many people are willing to drive the distance to get to your restaurant, when you have that other asset, you now have something that's not dependent on whether or not your doors are open for the day.
It's funny you say that. When I sold my junk removal company, I had a very huge customer list, and I had it all documented to the T. Who they were, what they did, their email address, their address, their phone number. A lot of it was information that obviously, I probably couldn't have given. I don't know the legalities of it. But I remember it was, the customer list was over 7,000. And I'm just sitting there like, man, I know at some point in time in the future, this may be valuable. Now, I didn't personally do anything with that list. I still have it to this day because I have it in my computer. Like, why not, right? But in a bulk form, I'm not saying all these junk removal companies should go sell their shit, but it's something that you have of value. Your customers, the reason why they're so important is because I could also go down my customer list and show you who are my biggest customers, who are my repeats, right? At the same time, the area, here's the most important part, the area in which they lived and worked. So I was in a very affluent area with my business. So that means the people that I worked with on a regular basis valued their time over money. It's very important because that means they are willing to pay whatever price within reason to get something done because they don't want to spend their time doing that said task. And that's what you have to label your customers. You have to have a top 10 for everything. Top 10 this, top 10 that. But it's funny you mentioned that because I always thought, I wonder if I could have ever sold that customer list.
That's only one way to use it, right? You can find a
Yeah.
sponsorship partner that wants to market to all the people on your list, right? If you are
Mm-hmm.
building an audience, and everyone always is, they're either building a professional network, a friend network, an audience like we are with podcasting, anyone that collects a group of people, there's another business out there that wants that group of people, right? We do like the Veteran Podcast Awards. We're doing the website right now. Don't go there. It's not up. But there's companies that care specifically about veterans, people like USA and Navy Federal Credit Union and a few others. That is their primary audience. If I've got an audience full of those people, do you think I can work some kind of sponsorship deal with those companies that want to talk to my people to the tune of 5, 10, 15 grand a month in ad revenue coming in? Absolutely. Absolutely. Andy's been on the stump shouting for jobber all day. Is Andy getting paid for those mentions? He could be. If you're a podcast and you mention another brand that you are getting paid for, you have to disclose that, or it's an FCC violation, or excuse me, FTC, Federal Trade Commission. Right? You see this now on TikTok, right? Hey, check out the new shades that I'm wearing. They're yellow and everyone loves them, and they're from blah, blah, blah business. Sponsored link, sponsored promotion, sponsor whatever it is. You have to disclose that. Just because you disclose it doesn't mean anything. You can use those things to your advantage for all these other different ways, for all these other different things. Become a sponsor, become a partner, become someone valuable to the people around you, whatever it is that you choose to do. Whatever it is you choose to do.
So
I got a quick story, and then I'll let you grab it back here.
Yeah, please.
The second guest I ever interviewed on a podcast was Dave Berlin. Dave Berlin is local in Vegas. When I got back to the U.S., I went out for a bachelor party in Vegas. It was a week long, and people are like, "Oh my god, a week? That's so much!" Like, no, you schedule one thing a day. Like, it's so much more relaxed. I flew out to Vegas to meet him, and the next time I flew out to Vegas was in Mick with Andy and Casey. I stayed at his house for free. Got to meet him. He took me all over town, introduced me to 50 high quality people, right? The next time we talked, he was doing the world's largest pizza party, Guinness World Record attempt in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? He called me. He's like, hey, Travis, I'm doing this thing. You want to come and hang out? Absolutely. So I was part of that day for the Guinness World Record attempt for world's largest pizza party, and they won it. And because of who I was around, I've got a picture of me holding the certificate from Guinness, right, for being part of the world record setting day. All because I made a connection, provided value, followed up, and showed up.
So many points. So I'll touch on two things. So first thing is I have a 3-step process for life, and you hit the third one, right? My 3-step process for life is simple, and everybody can do it. Here we go. Do the fucking thing, tell the fucking world, and show the fuck up. That's what you did, right? You did the thing. You went to Vegas. Then you told the world, hey, I'm coming back to Vegas. Let's do it again, right? And then when invited, you showed up. And this is the thing with networking and conferences. You can't be an attendee only. You gotta show up. So now there's some ways to do that. Either you become a speaker, or you get on a panel, or right you ask a lot of questions. In front of an audience, ask questions because people will look at you. Chances are they got the same question. A lot of people, I'm not on a panel yet. I'm not a keynote speaker. Well, can you ask a question? That's how you get a little bit of time. Even hell, Casey was with me when we were at JunkCon. There was a handful of people. I did a seminar on scrapping, and there was a handful of people that asked the question they wanted answered. And it's like, well, they got 7 seconds of stage time. Everyone kind of looked at them as though they were the ones willing to raise up their hand and willing to
pack the room. By the way, you should add that in there.
Pack the room.
Like no more sitting
room. The room. No sitting room. Standing room only. Standing room only. Not, and got yelled at because we went too long. And the reason we went too long is because people kept having questions and I kept answering. No big deal, right? They didn't give me the featured stage because they didn't. We'll leave it at that. Anyhow, what I wanted to talk about with Jobber. Here's what happened with Jobber. One of our listeners, J&K Property Renovation. He's a landscaper and he cleans up properties. He hit me up like 6 months ago. I was like, hey man, he's like, I've been listening to the Trash Talk Business podcast and I'm thinking about getting into junk removal, adding it to my landscaping business. I'm like, oh, okay, sounds good, whatever. All right, what can I do for you? And so I asked him a couple of questions. He goes, hey, how do you feel about Jobber? I was like, oh, I love Jobber. I was like, why do you ask? He goes, you're on their website. I forgot. 5-6 years ago, I did a testimonial. I went there and it was still under the franchise branding. So at first I was fucking pissed because I thought 3 years ago we scrubbed everything, right? Nope. Here I am, right? My testimonial, my face wearing the old company gear, So I reached out to Jobber. I said, hey, just so you know, I need to take this off. It's a legal thing, right? If I send you a new headshot, can you change it? And they're like, oh, absolutely. And then she goes, everyone here knows who you are. And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, we use this testimonial in this picture as part of our training of for all our new people. She goes, so everybody here knows who Andy is. And I was like, well, that's fucking interesting. Well, then I leaned in a little bit more, right? So what started as like me getting twitchy about being associated with a previous brand that I no longer represent turned into, okay, well, what else is there? And then they're like, well, you could be an affiliate member. I was like, what does that do? They're like, well, you get $300 if someone signs up for Jobber. And I was like, oh, that's pretty dope. I remember I used to do that, right? And that's a pretty simple thing, right? To your point about disclosing it. I tell people, I'm like, yeah, an affiliate guy hit me up, put my name in, and I get basically like 2 months free of Jobber, which helps me out. And I was promoting Jobber because I use it, right? We've had a couple other companies that wanted to sponsor us, including one of Jobber's competitors. And I'm like, I don't use their product. I'm not going to talk about it. You can't pay me to talk about something I'm not interested in talking about. So, and then with Jobber, the beautiful thing is I got talking to him and I'm like, yeah, this is what I love about Jobber. This is how we use it. And we're just talking. She goes, hey, would you like to be on a podcast? I go, yeah, absolutely. I already do podcasts. So it's like this conversation that started with me getting twitchy, right? Turned into this and talk about gives first. This is like 5-6 years ago when I wrote them a testimonial because they asked and I gave them a testimonial. Now I'm doing podcasts for them. It's to a point now where the last conversation I had with them is I said I want to come up to Edmonton and meet the people from Jobber because I want to talk to the engineers that build the thing and talk about how I want to customize it for me, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, or have you considered, right? And now it's like I'll put it on my dime. I'll fly up there because I want their product to be better because I want to enhance my experience. Talk about networking. It's like, I'm not asking for shit. I'm willing to give my time, my expertise, my knowledge, my perspective, because I know in the long term it will work out better for me. And to your point about sponsorships and everything like that, we've had people approach us to do sponsorships on this, and it's like, yeah, maybe we get to that point where we get paid, but moreover, I want to put out good quality content, and then pay me for my time, right? Not for the sponsor. Pay me to come to a conference and talk, or right. That's a hell of a lot more interesting. And that's what I love doing, right? Because what it comes down to, it's not about monetizing the podcast. Maybe we make a couple bucks doing it, fine. It's not the goal. The goal is to increase our influence. It's like you can get paid and then use money to buy influence, or you can get influence by putting out good quality content, right?
Well,
you've already play.
Well, you're accepting an award next month in New Orleans, right? We already talked about it.
Yeah.
So by the time this comes out, this has already happened. But the fact is, we have a few people that we know for sure, our listeners, going to the conference because we mentioned it.
Well, and you know why I'm getting an award? Because I showed up.
Yep.
Last year I went to Weins. I remember. So I got out of my non-compete, and I got with my virtual assistant. I say, hey, give me every single Weins conference that's going on this year. And I signed up for like 3/4 of them. I went to like 12 conferences last year. So I'm like, and a couple of them I'm not going to go back to because it wasn't a good fit and whatever. And this one in particular, I'm like, this is awesome. I remember I was there for 3 days. And day one was, I kind of saw the whole thing. And day two, I was like, I don't know why I'm here. Right. I'm a solo, I'm a solo. I don't have a team with me. And I started having imposter syndrome. And I'm like, this is whatever. And then day three, I flew out at like 2:00 in the afternoon. And I was like, you know what? I got to go there and walk around because I'm not going to just wake up and catch a flight. So I'm going to go. I'm going to show up, right? I preach it. I got to do it. And I have self-doubt every day. So for people like, oh, Andy just shows up and kicks ass. No, I got to pep talk the shit out of myself, right? Some days. And like that day in particular, I remember I walked in and I was like, yep, it's the same room. I've been here for the last 2 days. I really felt out of place because you've got some big haulers in there, and right. And so I walked the conference, and all of a sudden I saw this chick with blue hair, and there was a camera and like 3 or 4 people. And here's the deal. I fucking love cameras. And more importantly, cameras love me. It's the fact of life, right? So I walked up to this video crew, and I used to own a videography company. So I know what they're doing. They're looking for testimonials. They're looking for sound bites. And I walked up, and I was like, hey, and I had all my company branding on, and I showed up. And I get nervous. Even before we do the podcast, I get the jitters, or what you will, every time I turn that mic on, because it's like, man, what stupid shit am I going to say today? Or what awesome shit? We don't know. I don't fucking know. Let's roll the dice, So they had the camera there, and I walked up to the guy. I was like, hey, I said, what are you guys interviewing for? It was pleasant. And I could tell he was not having it. And I was not going to leave without an opportunity at least to be in front of the camera. I said, well, let me do a testimonial for you, right? And he was like, oh, you want to do a testimonial? I was like, let me do a testimonial, what I learned. I said, as a small hauler, I said, because there's not a lot of small haulers here, right? Because that's what they consider, in the waste industry, they consider junk removal or regional companies, they call them small haulers. So that's fine. So I said, hey, whatever, ask me the question. By the third question, he's like, man, you're fucking natural. I go, yeah, I do this. I got a podcast, right? I didn't sell any of that shit up front. I said, give me a chance. By the end of it, I did 5 or 6 videos. I'm all over their website. And then I followed up. I was doing, I did 5 or 6 episodes of the Small Hauler Corner as part of Trash Talk. Their version, or not Trash Talk, but it's Talking Trash Talk. I can't remember. But then I did another podcast. I did their Nothing Wasted podcast, which is all about recycling, right? And I can hit, what can I do? What can I do? What, right? It's not what can you give me? What can you buy from me? Let me tell you. It was what can I do? And when you continually say, what can I do? People either give you a path or they don't. And if they give you no path, you stop asking. Most times it was like, oh, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And I asked, how did I win this award in Waste 360? He said, you just kept showing up. You kept showing up. You put your podcast out there. It's like, I went to these other conventions. Like, we see you making an impact in a place where there's not a lot of impact right now, right? When you're like, the waste industry is an old industry. You go to these conferences, there's not a lot of people under 40. And so they need new, fresh blood. Otherwise, we're going to lose all this knowledge. We need fresh blood to learn from the guys that have been doing it for a long time. So that's why I won the award, or I'm going to win the award. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about the award. I'll take the press. The press is awesome. It was more that like, oh, Andy, You're on the right path. A year ago, you had all this self-doubt, and now I'm going to walk in with zero self-doubt. And it's not because I'm whatever. It's because I put the work in. That's what it comes down to. I got out of my comfort zone and I put the work in. And that's what this whole episode has been about here today. Is about whether it's going to networking events or going to conferences, you got to get out of your comfort zone. If you wanted to stay in your comfort zone, you wouldn't be listening to this episode. You wouldn't be an entrepreneur. You'd have a fucking corporate job or working for some other small business, right? It's like you get into business and it's uncomfortable, and then you get comfortable. You got to habitually chase the discomfort, right? Comfort is the enemy of progress. P.T. Barnum talked about this. You got to chase, do something new. Jesse Cole, the owner of the Savannah Bananas. If you don't know about Savannah Bananas,
I know about the Savannah
right?
Bananas.
He has a book.
Yeah,
you know, yeah, right. Your sunglasses match his yellow suit, and it's like find your yellow suit. The thing is with him, they're an entertainment business that happens to play baseball, and they talk about running 4 new experiments every single baseball game. And he's like, of the 4, 1 will fail, 2 will be whatever we'll learn from, and 1 might actually stick. It's like you got to be willing to be uncomfortable and fail at things. And that's how you become successful.
One of the things I wanted to mention about something like that, or like podcasting, when you are new into a business, you might not know who cares about you. You might not know who your audience actually is. The more times you show up, the more places you show up, the more things you show up to, you're going to find who is going to be interested in your stuff, who is not going to be interested in your stuff. I had a great guest, Amelia Antonetti. She's a gal that's exited a dozen companies at 20 million plus. And she actually created Listerine strips and licensed them to Listerine. So she's a multimillionaire all these times over. She's got a new thing called the Genius
I used to love those.
But she doesn't know who her audience is. So she's trying to get on as many podcasts a week to figure out who the heck her audience is. She's been on my show. She's been on veteran shows. She's been on shows all around the planet. She's got clients like Steve Harvey, Oprah, will.i.am, people that are just amazing are her clients. And she has a new thing, and she's still trying to find who her audience is. If you've got someone that high up doing that many podcast episodes, like me coming on a guest with Andy and Casey, I'm nowhere in the trash business, nowhere anywhere near it. That doesn't mean I can't provide value to your audience and people that are listening here today. Get out there, do the stuff, find who you resonate with. I initially started with the Nonprofit Architect podcast, and I thought to myself, said, Self, it might be a good idea to have a coaching consulting business around nonprofits. That's everything that you're doing right now. Give it a try. And I found out that ain't nobody want nonprofit coaching or consulting from me. I found that out. I was getting ready to hang it up, to put it on the shelf and not do any of that stuff anymore. And I talked to one of my mentors. By the way, get a mentor if you don't have one. Talked to one of my mentors. I was like, should I just be hanging this thing up? Like, what's the deal? He's like, well, what does your audience want? What do they want from you? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, have you asked them what they want? And at that point, I hadn't really asked anyone for any feedback. And I got on Facebook and I typed out, what do you guys expect from me? What do you guys want from me? What can I do for you? And the overwhelming response is like, we want to know how you're so badass at podcasting. What your audience doesn't know is when I launched my show in 2019, I went from no following, no business, no nothing to number 4 in the US within 3 months of launching. The things that I was doing were resonating with people. They saw where I was, and they saw where I showed up, and they saw what happened after just a few short months. I took that as my clue to, hey, nonprofits ain't working for you, but man, they seem to love you in the podcast game. How about you come out with some podcasting things? And I said, well, like, how do you get such a badass a podcast? I wrote it all down and I sold it as an ebook. I hosted it on ejunkie.com, which I'm not an affiliate of. Cost me $4 a month to have PDFs up there showing how to do things. I wrote a book called The Ultimate Complete Podcast Guide, which looking back was neither ultimate nor complete, but I sold it for $27. In like 6 weeks, I made $3,000.
Good joke.
$3,000 selling a $27 ebook. Are you kidding me? If that's not like the universe shouting like, this is your thing, I don't know what else is. Now we're up to 5 books. We're the only professional podcaster that has an accredited college course. You can go right now to 3 different universities, including Forbes Business School and Technology, and you can take my course. If you're not in the college courses, you can take the course anyway, just as a regular person. You don't got to enroll in college to take it. And I retired from the military last year. How on earth does any of this make sense? It doesn't. I know Andy's got his 3 things of do the thing, tell the world, and show up. Mine are show up with a great attitude, willing to provide value. Because anytime I've ever done that, it's always worked out. It's always been worth my time. Figure out what your audience is telling you. Find your real audience. Deliver what the heck they want and are willing to pay for. That's it. That's business in a nutshell. If you don't want to do the thing, right? Andy said you didn't have a team for a long time. Figure out a way you can delegate it, automate it, or eliminate it. There's a lot of things that I do each and every work. I find myself doing it the next week. I'm like, does this give me energy or does it take it away? If it takes it away, I'm getting rid of that task in some fashion. It's either going to someone on my team, I'll find a process to automate it, or I'm going to get rid of that thing because I can't be wasting my time on that thing.
For the record, I've already used delegate, automate, or eliminate several times. I want to owe you lunch next time I see you. Hell, that might be in my next book. We don't know, right? It's a collection of it's a collection of ideas I've heard from other people because it's so simple, right? If it's an energy suck and it's got to get done, well, what are you going to do about it? And that's not a rhetorical question, right? And that's the challenge we have. This is a great time. Couple things. First, audience. You've hung out with us for this last hour. Continue to tell us. If you listen, Casey and I, we have our Trash Talk Business Podcast VIP page on Facebook, and we continually ask, what do you guys want us to cover next? Because that's where we're at. We want to cover, I learned this from Travis, right? We want to cover and bring on guests that you want to hear from, right? Our goal is to be servant leaders, right? And selfless service is about putting your needs above ours. And I tell you what, when you say, hey, I want to answer this question, one of two things: either A, I have the answer and I can say it, and one of the best ways to retain knowledge is to teach somebody else, or B, I don't have the answer and it's an opportunity for me to learn. As we're looking at year 2 now of this podcast, when we first came up with the name, we wanted to do Trash Talk. That was the name of the podcast. And turns out Gary V has Trash Talk. We already knew that, right? That's when he's going around a rummage sales, buying stuff and then flipping it. And then we looked at a couple other names and all of them were pretty much taken up. And then Casey basically came up with the Trash Talk Business Podcast. And I didn't love it at first. I'm like, oh, it's really wordy and it's long. And, we just want to sit around talk trash. What we've realized is our audience isn't only people in junk removal. It's also people that are in business in general. And that's why this next year, one thing we have heard is getting more of a global perspective. So bringing someone on like you, Travis, like you're our first non-tactical person we've ever had. Everybody else has been either in the junk removal space or an accountant or a lawyer, right? And it's like, well, hold on, let's bring somebody in that knows things about things, right? And expose you to our audience, because our goal now is, hey, if you listen to the whole library up until this point, 55 episodes, you got a foundational learning. Now it's, what have you not even considered? What questions have you answered or asked even yet? And so bringing you on today has been phenomenal, so we can go next level. And generally we're all over the place, and you have a way of really narrowing this in, because you're the expert at this medium, right? Which allows us to be better podcasters. Our goal, or at least my goal, and in case you can speak to this, is to be better at the content we put out for our audience. The goal isn't just sit around and bullshit every week. No, it's like, how do we continually up our game? Because we owe it to the audience. We're challenging them to up their game in junk removal. We owe it to ourselves to up our game in podcasting.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's more than just podcasting. I forget,
I gotta put out this alibi real quick. Alarac. It's been sitting on my computer this whole time. I gotta drop it in before, people have been sticking around. An hour ago, I said I was gonna Google it, which I did. They could have Googled themselves by this point. Alarac stands for All Army Activities. I've been in the military 19 years. By the time this episode comes out, 19 years in a couple weeks. All these years, didn't know what Alarac stood for. I knew how to spell it. ALARACT, Alarac. Yep. And it's All Army Activities. I feel like I know less now, because the fuck, I don't know. Now I'm confused. Because you have AR 630-1, which tells you how to wear the uniform, and the Alarac is like set enforcement of it. Somebody in the military is going to tear me up for this ignorance that I have after 19 years, and yet there's a lot of shit in the military I still have no clue how it works. Casey, back to you.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's more than just podcasting. It's how to deliver information that's valuable without just sounding like, oh yeah, look what we looked up online yesterday. It's also being transparent sharing that, hey, there's things that we still don't know. There's things that we learn when we have these podcasts, like today, for example. Having Travis on, it's not just providing value to our listeners, it's teaching us a great deal. Like, we're learning just the same as our listeners are learning, and we're just that medium. We're that avenue that is provided for our listeners. Now, I want to say this real quick. I forgot to mention this. I actually partnered up with a nonprofit recently, and I now am with them, and they're called Gallant Few, right? And the reason why, and I've known this nonprofit for a long time. The founder, he's a great guy, ranger buddy of mine down the road, and he reached out to me mainly because he's having a lot of trouble, a lot of issues growing his nonprofit, and he was doing great. So I kind of figured out, like, okay, we talked about why it was doing what it was doing. Come to find out, it's because he was doing the right steps, but he had the wrong people in the wrong spots. Where he had partnership development, which is where I'm coming in to do now, he had someone who is not meant for that. And I'm like, you need a salesman. You need someone who's good at sales, someone who's good at talking to people, getting people together, and not just believing in the same mission, but executing the same mission together. And I was like, no offense, but the best person for that job is a successful business owner type. The reason why, you need someone who's used to making their own schedule, right? Having their own agenda, coming up with a plan. And obviously he signs off on big decisions, but someone who doesn't need to be babysat, someone who doesn't need to, be told what to do. And it's funny, I told him that because 6-7 years ago, I was not that person, right? I mean, first year Casey was the guy who was, I don't know what to do. What do I do here? How do I get business? How do I make money here? Learning as much as I could, but look where it got me to today, where, I think Andy's kind of jealous sometimes, but I work Mondays, right? And he gives me so much shit. He's like, oh, look at you got to work today. Well, yeah, but Andy's mission and my mission are completely different, but we're both happy doing what we do. And it took me a while to get to where I'm at, and I'm still working my ass off when I do, but I just chose to have less work. I'd rather work less than 15 days a month. That's just my goal. But talking about the nonprofit, it's seeing the vision that they're trying to see as well. And they're like, well, do you believe in this mission? And I do believe in the mission. That's the only reason I came on board. I didn't do it for any other reason except for last year, every job I did, a percentage of it was donated to this mission. But he saw the value in me after 5 years, right? Because he didn't ask me this a long time ago. He asked me recently because he saw the value that not only have I gained, but the value that I put out now. And it's because of podcasts like this, partners like Andy, and our listeners that I am able to provide the value I provide now. So my last word is, if you're out there listening, get on a podcast, hit up Travis. Shit, I asked him a couple things that trip, man, just because I didn't know better. You taught me the difference in a damn website and what we have. I didn't know the difference, but ask questions, get on people's podcasts, and put some info out there that's valuable.
Yeah. Travis, what do you got for top takeaways from today?
Top takeaways for today. Well, first off, I'm going to show your listeners here. Every time I do anything, I'm taking notes.
Yep.
I'm the guest here. I'm supposed to be answering questions. I took notes throughout the entire episode.
Here, I have right here on the top of my notepad from when we talked last time: delegate, automate, eliminate.
It's
right here.
Right there.
And I've used it several times since.
It's right there.
Yep.
Casey mentioned something about, maybe it might have been Andy. I can't remember. Talk about people that value their time more than their money. That is,
well, was Casey.
That's an abundance mindset, because if you value money over time, that's a scarcity mindset.
Yep. I said this years ago on a stage one time. I said, it's only money. You can always make more. And people looked at me like I was nuts. And I'm like, and they're like, well, only rich people talk like that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not the way, though.
Rich in mind, right? Like, there is a finite amount of time. That is true. You die, right? Okay, newsflash, you will die. So you have a finite amount of time on this earth. That's a fact. There is not a finite amount of money you can earn.
No. No, you can earn unlimited money. So I used to be in the money game. I used to help people with their personal finance. I helped 400 families pay off $6 million in debt a number of years ago. One of the biggest problems with money in general is that people don't understand is if you're in America, chances are you are in the top 1% of the world, because in order to be in the top 1%,
Yep.
you only have to make about $40,000 a year. So if you look at a text, I'm not pushing the Bible, you like it or you don't like it, almost everything in the Bible is geared towards money and how you take care of it and how you steward it. It talks about working with money. Well, if you're America, chances are you're in the top 1% of wealth in the world. Why aren't you acting like you're wealthy? Why aren't you acting like, yeah, you know what? I got some new money in. I just did my tax return. I know Travis was talking about assets and real estate, business, paper, commodities. I'm going to put some of my money into building an asset, because an asset is what pays me money. An asset is what helps me grow. An asset is what helps me work Casey's hours instead of Andy's hours. I did the math last week for somebody. I work less than 10 hours a week of actual work. I scheduled this on a time that I'm available because all of my time is available, because that's how I've designed my life. We didn't get into things like my childhood and all that stuff. Let me give you a quick run through. I know we're at time here, but growing up for me was 36 moves, 12 schools, 6 different states, 5 different foster homes. 2 people in my family tried to kill me, and I was homeless twice. You can let that punch you in the gut, or you can figure out how I'm going to use those things to fuel my fire into being the person that I want to be. It doesn't matter how your book started. It's up to you to figure out how that book is going to end. What are you going to write about your life that you decide what to make your life into? What is it going to be? Who are you going to be? And you have that ability within you. Everyone does. Check me out, link up with me. The one thing is to go on Linktree, Travis D. Johnson. That's linktr.ee/Travis D. Johnson. It's got all my socials in there, my business, my podcast, all that stuff. Connect with me. Reach out. Don't be one of those people that sits on the sidelines and says, oh, that's a great idea. Shoot me a text. Send me an email. Connect with me on social. Tell me that you loved my interview on Trash Talk Business Podcast. Tell me that I'm wrong and that I suck. But don't just do nothing, because knowing is only half the battle.
God, is it a good finish? See, this is why you bring professionals in, guys that know how to land the plane. Casey and I are up there, turbulence, shaking, like, we got to put her on the ground eventually. Let's close her out, right? We get her.
You don't even say shit after that,
right?
Like
no,
stop.
All right, there we go. We're done. That's full stop. We're when the plane hits the ground and then the guy jerks her back, and woo, that's what we're doing here. There we go. Episode 55, Trash Talk Business Podcast. Excellent guest, Travis Johnson, sharing his knowledge, depth. Check him out on Linktree. The story of the 36 moves, the 6 states, the 12 schools, the people that try to kill him. I've had the opportunity to hear that story. The other podcast I do, which is the Welcome Home podcast, the transformation from troops in boots to veterans in the civilian world, is an amazing story. Travis had me on his podcast. What is the name of that podcast?
Titan Evolution Podcast.
Become a Titan. Titan Evolution podcast. One of my favorite, if not the best interview I've ever had. So if you want to peel back the layers on how to become a Titan within your industry, how to become the icon within your industry, that's a podcast you got to check out. He's had some amazing guests on that podcast. For Casey, I'm Andy. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.